My wife's movie club watched Friendly Persuasion. This is a 1956 movie starring Gary Cooper, Anthony Perkins, and Dorothy McGuire. It is about the Birdwells, a family that live in the southern Indiana that go through a test of conscience during the Civil War. Oh, and by the way, they happen to be religious members of the Society of Friends. The name of the film, Friendly Persuasion, is a reference to how the Society of Friends were to speak to each other. The members were often called Friends or Quakers. The term Quaker started out as a mocking nickname for the Society of Friends, referring to the group as those that tremble at the word of the Lord. But, like the Mormons, the group took the originally derisive name and embraced it, even turning it into a positive. I have often said Hollywood doesn't get religion, but the Quakers are represented positively and mostly accurately in this film. For example, the movie shows us a silent meeting of Quakers. People only speak when moved upon by the Spirit. That is an actual practice. The church, as we would call it, is called the meeting house, where they had what they called unprogrammed services, called meetings. And in those meetings, they were mostly silent until anyone in the congregation felt inspired to speak by the Spirit. And so they would speak. That's portrayed in the film. Music is not allowed or encouraged within the Quaker community at this time. One of the first things we hear about music is from Jess Birdwell, who says, "We don't hold with music playing." And that is accurate. The Quakers rejected extravagant religious ceremonies or rituals, including planned or rehearsed music. To some, music was also seen as a distraction from the spiritual life. In recent years, I believe that the Quaker community, what's left of them, has accepted music as a part of their services. In addition to the religious ceremonies and rituals not being part of them, they also believe that God was found in the people, not in the churches. And so this is a part of their belief, that the belief that God is in them, that the light of Christ is within everyone, that type of idea. Also, we see in the movie a character named Enoch. He is a runaway slave who finds placed to labor on the farm as he's hired as a hired hand, and we are told his children are still enslaved. This is also reflective of the Quakers. They were abolitionists, and they were forbidden from buying, selling, or owning slaves for about 100 years before the U.S. Civil War. Also, Eliza, we see, is one of the Quaker ministers. I don't know if that's the right term, but in the Quaker community, they did not have an official clergy, and they also believed in spiritual equality between men and women. So it was very common for the Quakers to have women ministers. And one final thing that is prevalent throughout is the theme of pacifism in the Quaker community. Obviously, the Quakers are pacifists, and also, in addition to the pacifism, they would not take legal oaths. Pacifism is introduced in the very first scene of this film, with the young Jess being attacked by a goose, but told not to retaliate. His mother gives him a clear lesson that violence is not the answer, and that he should be strictly non-violent. This ideal is first challenged at the silent worship service when a Union soldier enters and asks for volunteers to fight in the Civil War against the Confederates. The Civil War has been raging for 2 years, and there has been much bloodshed. To the Quakers, this is a dilemma of conscience. They are opposed to slavery and are active abolitionists, but to fight this war would mean to kill men. Eliza Birdwell responds for the congregation as their minister, saying, "We are opposed to slavery, but we do not think it right to kill one man to free another." The Union soldier responds, "It is not going to be a question of fighting for freedom or a principle, but protecting your own towns, your own homes from attack." He continues, "Are you ready to put up with looting and killing without lifting a finger? Are you afraid to fight?" And further he says, "Do you think it's right to let others do the fighting for you?" The discussion continues, and we are asked, hey, the conflict is at the door. How will you respond? Are you willing to let violence occur just because you're not involved? Is there responsibility to fight for your own and others' liberty? Will you allow others to be killed or be taken into slavery? Will you not protect your own town, your home, your wife and children? Jess offers, I often ask myself what I would do if I saw my family in danger, my wife and children threatened. If the test comes, all I can say is, I hope and pray I can be an instrument of the Lord. I think Jess Birdwell has a good view of the conflict, but let each person answer for himself. Here's one opinion. If a life is to be taken, then it should be in defense of life, or to preserve life. For all other circumstances, we should engage in friendly persuasion. It is one thing to fight as the aggressor, and a completely different thing to fight in defense. Violence begets violence. By turning the other cheek, or through forgiveness, we can break the cycle of violence and hatred. Not through more violence, but only through friendly persuasion. So, where do you draw the line? When should you get involved? When should you put your life on the line for a cause? For Josh Birdwell, the son, his conscience tells him that the cause, the Civil War, is a just cause, and that other people are fighting and dying for it. Therefore, he must do the hard thing and serve his fellow man. Now, Anthony Perkins in this role, his acting is actually quite impressive. When he hurts and feels pain, it's seen, and one of the scenes where he shoots and his enemy falls after firing his weapon, you can really see that in his face. It's pretty remarkable. Anyway, these scenes are to remind us that war is hell, and we should only resort to war as a last resort. His mother gives him an ultimatum before the war. She tells him, you choose me or you choose the war, and he decides to choose to go to war. Purdy, the Quaker who originally vehemently opposed the idea of joining the war, saying that they can burn my farm, attack my family, and I would not take up arms against my fellow man. Later, his barn is burnt, and his property is stolen, his horses are stolen, so he does join the fight, and he tells Jess it's the only way left is to join the fight. That's the only way to help. For Purdy, whatever is right for him is right for everybody else, and now that he has been attacked, the line has been crossed, his mind has been changed, wartime calls for a different kind of thinking. Jess Birdwell, on the other hand, his conscience tells him to wait, to turn the other cheek. He has said that he is not sure where his line is, and we find out that his line is where he protects his family and friends. When triggered by the horses returning without their riders, he rides to the fight, and in order to save his friends and family who appear to be in danger. He finds his friend Sam and his son wounded. He is also grazed by a bullet, and he gets back up and overpowers his would-be murderer, and even then he shows mercy. His ideals shine through, and we get the feeling that he was correct. It was good. Previously, his Methodist friend Sam had said, I'd like to see someone hold out for a better way of settling things, and Jess does just that. So, Josh's willingness to do the right but hard thing, Purdy's retaliation to prevent future harm for others, and Jess's hesitant action with mercy also shows us the difficult choices made to be true to our conscience. And I, for one, am grateful for all three approaches. There is a parallel story about conscience to the war story in this film. It's a little more lighthearted, but worth a quick look. The organ, or music. The organ is first introduced by a salesman where we learn that it's improper for Quakers to have music in church. It's reintroduced at the fair where the father, Jess, buys it and has it sent home. At home, the wife, Eliza, gives him an ultimatum. Either it's her or the organ, and the father picks the organ, and the wife goes out to sleep in the barn. The father then joins her in the barn, and they are reconciled. And for a while, the organ is put in the attic, and lastly, we see when they return from war, the organ is in the front room of the house, and the film ends. Did you see the parallels? First, we have the temptation. The organ salesman and the Union soldier both ask Jess and the family to act contrary to the Quaker norms. Then we have the fair, and where the organ is bought, and we also have the relationship between the Union soldier and Maddie. This is welcomed by Jess within the home. Next, Jess is given an ultimatum. It's me or the organ. And just like Josh is given an ultimatum, it's me or fighting in the war. Jess chooses the organ. Josh chooses to fight. The organ is placed in the attic, out of sight at first, but in the house. And Josh joins the fight, but Jess stays nonviolent. Finally, the organ is in the front room in the final scene, and the family has returned from war, but all with maybe a new perspective. I think it's also worth looking at the film from Eliza's perspective. Ask yourself, what is she thinking? What is she going through? Now, she is a devout Quaker, and it always seems through the whole film that she has this concerned look about her family's choices. First, little Jess is fighting with the family goose. It causes her heartache. Her daughter Maddie is in love with a Union officer. He's not a Quaker, and she doesn't quite approve. Her oldest son Josh goes against her pacifism to fight in the war. Her husband Jess brings home an organ. He races his buggy on the way to church. He encourages Maddie in the non-Quaker soldier relationship. And he doesn't intervene when the son decides to commit war. It reminds me kind of the Fiddler on the Roof story, and I wonder if a real Quaker mother would feel such great loss as she let go of some of her traditions. What do you think?
Won't you marry me, up to the altar, please carry me. Give me combs for my curls, made of silver and pearls, and a two-penny bridal bouquet.